and their representation, reproduction, and recreation. And so I think the point of it is that while I change and one thing leads to another, I'm not interested in representing what I do or think, or producing what I do, or recreating it.
Frank Stella is one of the most recognized and important artists of the late 20th century. He's famous for working in the styles of minimalism and geometric abstraction. Later in his career, he moved into making reliefs and sculptures that seemed to be the opposite of minimal.
It seemed to me that you had to have some kind of way of addressing yourself to the viewer which wasn't so much of an invitation as it was a presentation. In other words, I made something and then it was available for people to look at, but it wasn't an invitation for them to explore, and it wasn't an invitation for them to read a record of what I had done exactly. In fact, I think one of the things you could say about my paintings, which I think is probably a good thing, it's not immediately apparent how they're done, in a way. I mean, you can say that it's finely brushed or it's sprayed or this, that, and the other, but the first thing you do is see it, I think, and not see how it was done. It's not a particular record of anything. I mean, and that may explain in some kind of way its unpopularity with the critics. When I said make it hard for the critics to write about, I mean, there's not that much for them to describe. First of all, it's a simple situation visually, and the painting doesn't do that much in conventional terms. They can't explain to you how one part relates to another. I mean, basically what they're after is that it's too easy for me, so therefore it couldn't be any good. He's saying there's no suffering, there's no this, there's no feeling, there's no questioning. I just keep doing it, and I don't have troubled periods. I don't have crises and anxiety and all of that that are documented on the canvas. There's a tremendous assumption of artistic humility, which I didn't seem to have. One, too much success, and also being essentially too smug about it in some kind of way. There's nothing in descriptive terms for them to say. I mean, or to point out something that you, the viewer, might have missed if you were slightly untrained.
Stella said, "Abstract paintings must be as real as those created by the 16th century Italians." Stella said, "I don't like to say I have given my life to art. I prefer to say art has given me my life." Stella said, "I want to make exalted art. A successful image has pictorial lift. I'm looking for whatever is up there."
It seemed to me that the action painters, and particularly the second generation action painters, adopted an attitude towards painting which was based a lot on an idea of all-over attack, but that they were inconsistent. They didn't really carry it out. In other words, it was supposed to be an all-over painting, but it ended up in working with a kind of, or it seemed to me, too much of a conventional push-pull. The other big thing was, as far as I was concerned, that they almost all seemed to get in trouble in the corners. They always started out with a big expansive gesture, and then they ended up fiddling around or trying to make that one explosive gesture work on the canvas in some kind of way. And it seemed to me basically in sort of painting in energy terms finally compromised by all of the fixing up that went around the supposedly loose and free explosive images. I mean, we've got to be more an illustration of energy than an establishment of real pictorial energy. I didn't want that. I wanted to be able to have what I think were some of the virtues of abstract expressionism, but still have them under a kind of control, but not control for its own sake, a kind of conceptual, painterly control that I felt made the pictures, or would make even stronger pictures. I wanted to make my pictures at least stronger, what I was doing. The business about my work being unfeeling and being cold and intellectual, I mean, I can't quite explain it. I mean, I think the only explanation I can make is a biographical one. Certainly no one would see the black paintings now as kind of cold and calculating or very logical, but they seem to seem that way in the context of 59 and 60. They were lean compared to some paintings, but the general look of them, I mean, if you really looked at it, it seemed to me that they had an awful lot to do with somebody like Rothko and the general feeling of it. And no one accused Rothko of being cold and intellectual. Through the use of a kind of flat, regulated pattern, I could make a painting situation that read or seemed flatter. And I felt that that flatness was a kind of just an absolute necessity for modernist painting at the time. I mean, there were a lot of things in those paintings that were not in anybody else's paintings at the time, and it seemed to me that there were concerns that painting, in a way, had to address itself too.
In the later stages of his career, Stella seemed to go from minimalism to maximalism. He introduced the human touch and a painterly quality in with his geometric, abstract approach.
What I liked about Caravaggio is that people were so happy that it was so real looking, and so then all of the emphasis was on the idea that Caravaggio had this skill and developed this technique to make images on a flat surface look real. And I thought, well, that's great. I can see why everybody loves that, and it looks really real. But I didn't care that much about the illusion. It was real to me in the sense that he wanted it to be, the effort that went into it was painting. The reality was in the pictorial effort to express the image. And so how real it looked wasn't the reality that I was looking at. The reality I was looking at was the reality of being so involved in picturing something, making a picture. These paintings are different from the black paintings, although the basic format is the same. The first thing, most obvious thing, is the fact that they are ever so slightly shaped. And that came about actually by accident. When I made the drawings, I did want the turn, because I wanted the force or the path of the brush or the design or the scheme, whatever you want to call it. I wanted it to move. And so the jogs were a way of making it move. It was a little fussy, and if you're going to shape things and work with metallic surfaces, perhaps you should be a little bolder. And taking the notion of shaping a little bit farther, making the piece not a rectangle, but its own form. And so that kind of wrapped up the idea of shaped canvas as a deliberate diagrammatic kind of force.
He probably will transform to something else. He always, he's constantly changing. That's what makes Frank Stella Frank Stella. Frank Stella is always fighting against himself. He sets up these systems, he sets up these way of workings, and then exhausts them, picks up the pieces, and makes up a new thing.